Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Malcolm Reed stared at the steam rising from his coffee mug, his kitchen table a neutral zone in what was rapidly becoming a domestic Cold War. Across from him, his wife of 5 years, Alyssa Thorne Reed, sat with perfect posture, her manicured nails tapping a precise rhythm against her own untouched cup. The morning light, streaming through their kitchen windows, gave her an almost ethereal glow, but Malcolm wasn't fooled. He recognized the calculated desperation in her eyes. "It's just 22,000, Malcolm," Alyssa said, her voice a practiced blend of reason and vulnerability. "Delaney deserves a beautiful wedding. You know how important this is to my family." Malcolm took a slow sip of his coffee, using the moment to gather his thoughts. At 38, he had built his cybersecurity consulting firm from nothing, climbing out of childhood where money was scarce and security scarcer. He understood numbers and risks better than most. It was what made him exceptional at his job. And right now, all his instincts were firing warning signals. 22,000 isn't just anything, he replied, his tone level but firm. That's a significant amount of money for a wedding that, frankly, seems extravagant. Alyssa leaned forward, her blonde hair falling perfectly around her shoulders. Nothing about her was ever accidental. "The venue in Asheville is exclusive. The flowers alone are." "I know what flowers cost," Malcolm interrupted. "And I know what venues cost. What I don't understand is why your parents aren't covering this, especially given how often your mother mentions their portfolio." A flash of something annoyance perhaps crossed Alyssa's features before she smoothed it away with a practiced smile. "Daddy's investments have been temporarily tied up. It's just a cash flow issue. They'll pay us back." Malcolm nearly laughed at that. In the 3 years he'd known the Thorne family, not a single loan had ever been repaid. Money flowed one way in their world toward whatever enhanced their carefully curated image of prosperity. "We both know that's not true," he said quietly till Alyssa's facade cracked slightly. "Please, Malcolm. Delaney will be humiliated if she has to downsize the wedding. The Kavanaughs will be there. The Prestons, too." She named Charlotte's elite families as if they were royalty. "Everyone who matters will see." Malcolm stood and walked to the sink, rinsing his mug with precise movements. He turned and leaned against the counter, studying his wife. When they'd met, he'd been drawn to her ambition and social ease qualities he lacked. Only later did he realize that what he'd mistaken for ambition was actually hunger, an insatiable need for approval that made her bend to the will of her family, particularly her mother's. "Do you remember what your mother said at our wedding?" he asked quietly. Alyssa blinked, caught off guard by the change in direction. "She said a lot of things. She said, and I quote, 'At least the food is decent, despite the circumstances.'" Malcolm's voice remained even. "The circumstances being that I insisted on paying for our wedding myself, instead of accepting their money and their control." "She didn't mean." "She did." Malcolm cut her off. "Your family has made it abundantly clear what they think of me. I'm the commoner who somehow tricked their precious daughter into marriage. That's not fair, isn't it?" Malcolm pulled out his phone and scrolled through it briefly before setting it on the table, screen up. "This is from your mother last month, when you told her I couldn't make it to their charity gala." Perhaps if Malcolm spent less time with his computers and more time making connections, he wouldn't be so limited in his prospects. Alyssa had the grace to look embarrassed. "Mom just doesn't understand what you do. She understands perfectly well. She just thinks it's beneath you." Malcolm sat back down across from her. "Here's what I don't get, Alyssa. You married me, not your family. So why do they still have this much power over you?" Alyssa's eyes welled with tears, whether genuine or tactical. Malcolm couldn't tell anymore. "They're my family. And what am I?" Silence filled the kitchen, punctuated only by the soft hum of the refrigerator. Malcolm watched his wife's face, searched for some sign that she would choose him, just once, over the family that seemed to delight in his discomfort. "Please," she whispered finally. "I need to do this for Delaney." Malcolm sat back, a decision forming. A month ago, he had noticed Alyssa taking unusual interest in their financial statements. She'd asked pointed questions about his business accounts, their investments, the trusts he'd established. Something in her manner had triggered his carefully honed sense for threats. That night, after she'd fallen asleep, he had spent hours restructuring their finances, securing his assets, and reviewing the prenuptial agreement she'd signed without reading carefully enough. IT had been a precaution then. Now it felt like foresight. "I'll transfer the money this afternoon," he said finally. That Alyssa's expression bloomed with relief and something that might have been victory. "Thank you, Malcolm. It means so much to—" "It's a gift," he interrupted. "But don't ask me to go to the wedding. I won't sit there and pretend your family respects me." Alyssa's smile faltered, but quickly recovered. "Of course. I understand." Malcolm nodded once, standing to leave. "I have a client meeting downtown. I'll be back late." As he gathered his laptop bag, he felt Alyssa's arms wrap around him from behind, her chin resting on his shoulder. "I love you," she murmured, her lips brushing his ear. Malcolm closed his eyes briefly, remembering when those words had felt true. "I know," he replied, gently disentangling himself before walking out the door. The Thorne family home sat on 2 acres in Myers Park, Charlotte's old money neighborhood. Its colonial facade and manicure garden spoke of generational wealth, a carefully maintained fiction that Malcolm had seen through within weeks of meeting them. The Thornes lived on credit, appearance, and strategic marriages, a house of cards that required constant vigilance to maintain. Malcolm wasn't there to witness it, but he could picture the scene clearly. Alyssa, seated in her mother's sunroom, accepting congratulations for securing the wedding funds. Joelle Thorne would be presiding over the gathering like a queen, her silver hair styled impeccably, her thin lips curved in what passed for a smile. Alyssa sank into the plush chair beside her sister, warmth spreading through her chest as Delaney squealed with delight. "He's actually giving you the money?" Delaney asked, her eyes wide. At 26, she had their mother's sharp features and their father's taste for the expensive. "No strings attached." "None," Alyssa confirmed, accepting the flute of champagne her mother handed her. "Just that he won't attend." Joelle Thorne sniffed dismissively. "Small mercies. The last thing your sister needs is your husband skulking around her wedding like some IT department refugee." "Mother," Alyssa protested weakly, though she couldn't stop the small laugh that escaped her. "What?" Joelle arched a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Am I wrong? The man wears button-downs from department stores, for heaven's sake." "He's not that bad," Alyssa said, but her defense lacked conviction. Delaney leaned forward conspiratorially. "Remember when he tried to explain blockchain to the Hendersons at the club? I thought Richard was going to die of boredom." "Not everyone finds your husband's interests as fascinating as you pretend to," Joelle said, swirling her champagne. "Though I suppose his financial success makes up for his social shortcomings." Alyssa felt a familiar twist of discomfort, quickly drowned by the pleasure of her mother's rare approval. Joelle Thorne's validation was a drug Alyssa had been chasing her entire life. "At least he's generous," Delaney said, already scrolling through wedding venues on her phone. "I was worried I'd have to cut the string quartet." "Heaven forbid," Joelle murmured. "The Prestons had a harpist and a quartet at their daughter's wedding. We can't possibly do less." Alyssa nodded, pushing aside the memory of Malcolm's pained expression that morning. "He understands how important family is." Delaney snorted. "Does he, though? He's practically estranged from his own parents. His father was abusive," Alyssa said, a rare moment of genuine defense rising within her. Joelle waved her hand dismissively. "Everyone has family difficulties, dear. Mature people overcome them instead of cutting ties. It shows a lack of resilience." The conversation drifted to floral arrangements and seating charts, Alyssa's guilt subsiding with each sip of champagne. This was where she belonged in this world of social nuance and carefully maintained appearances. Malcolm had never truly fit, had never even tried to adapt to her family's expectations. Later, as they pored over fabric swatches for the table settings, Delaney's phone chimed. She checked it and grimaced. "It's Malcolm. He wants to know if I received the transfer." Joelle rolled her eyes. "So pedestrian. Couldn't he have simply trusted you to tell him?" Delaney's fingers flew across her screen, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. "I'm going to thank him properly. What did you write?" Alyssa asked, reaching for the phone, but Delaney held it away. Just making sure he knows his place, Delaney said, hitting send with a flourish. Let me see, Alyssa insisted, a note of worry creeping into her voice. Delaney handed over the phone with a dramatic sigh. Alyssa read the message, and the blood drained from her face. Please don't come. We don't need poor people like you at our wedding. Delaney, Alyssa hissed. Why would you say that? Oh, calm down, Delaney replied, taking back her phone. He already said he wasn't coming. And it's funny. He's my husband, Alyssa protested. Joelle set down her champagne flute. Your sister's just being honest, Alyssa. Your husband would be embarrassingly out of place. You know it as well as we do. She patted Alyssa's hand. Besides, he'll probably just laugh it off. Isn't that what you always say? That he has a good sense of humor. Alyssa nodded weakly, the familiar desire to please her mother overriding her concern. Yes, of course. He'll understand it's just Delaney being Delaney. But a cold knot of dread had formed in her stomach, a feeling that something important had just shifted. Malcolm was reviewing a security protocol for a banking client when the message came through. His phone buzzed once on his desk, and he glanced at it absently, expecting a client update. Instead, he saw Delaney's name and a preview of text that made him set down his coffee. That he unlocked the phone and read the full message. Please don't come. We don't need poor people like you at our wedding. Malcolm stared at the words, the familiar sting of the Thorne family's contempt washing over him. But this time, something was different. This time, there was evidence, tangible proof of what he'd always known, but Alyssa had always denied. With methodical precision, he took a screenshot of the message. Then he opened his family group chat, the one with Alyssa and her family, and left it without comment. Next, he went to his contacts and deleted Alyssa's entry. Finally, he powered off his phone completely and set it face down on his desk. Malcolm looked out his office window at the Charlotte skyline, his reflection superimposed over the city's towers. His expression revealed nothing, but inside, calculations were already running cold, precise, and unstoppable. 1 month earlier, Malcolm had woken at 3 a.m. to find Alyssa's side of the bed empty. This wasn't unusual. She sometimes suffered from insomnia, but the faint glow from his home office caught his attention. Moving silently down the hallway, he had paused outside the door. Listening to the soft rustle of papers, he'd pushed the door open to find Alyssa hurriedly closing a file drawer, her expression momentarily panicked before settling into a smile. Can't sleep, she'd explained, rising from his desk chair. Thought I'd organize some of these papers for you. Malcolm had nodded, pretending to accept the explanation. Come back to bed, he'd said, kissing her forehead. You need your rest. But after she'd fallen asleep, he'd returned to his office and examined the drawer she'd been rifling through. It contained their financial records, tax returns, investment statements, business documents. Nothing seemed missing, but the order had been disturbed. Now, sitting in his downtown office with Delaney's message fresh on his screen, Malcolm was grateful for the steps he'd taken that night and in the weeks following. He'd moved significant portions of his assets into trusts that Alyssa couldn't touch. He'd created new passwords for all their accounts. He'd spoken with his attorney about the potential dissolution of their marriage and reviewed the prenuptial agreement Alyssa had signed, paying particular attention to the clause regarding public betrayal. Malcolm had always been good at contingency planning. It was part of what made him successful in cybersecurity. Identify vulnerabilities, establish protections, prepare for breaches. He'd applied the same principles to his marriage when the first warning signs appeared. He swiveled his chair to face his computer and opened a secure folder labeled Tanglewood, a reference to the symphony Alyssa had dragged him to on their third date. Inside were copies of all relevant financial documents, screenshots of problematic text exchanges with the Thorne family, and notes from conversations where Alyssa had revealed her family's true opinions of him. Malcolm added the screenshot of Delaney's message and then sat back, considering his next steps. The betrayal hurt deeply, but he wouldn't allow emotion to cloud his judgment. This required precision, patience, and perfectly timed execution. Opening his contact list, he scrolled to Trevor Miles' number. Trevor had been his friend since they were 10, long before Malcolm had money or status. Trevor, with his food truck and his loud laugh, had never quite meshed with Alyssa's social aspirations, but he'd always been honest with Malcolm. Time to cash in that favor. Malcolm muttered to himself as he picked up his office phone to dial. The line rang. Malcolm stared at his computer screen, his reflection in the dark monitor showing no trace of the turmoil beneath. His face remained expressionless, betraying none of the hurt and anger simmering just below the surface. "Trevor," he said when his friend answered. "We need to talk. Not over the phone. Can you meet me at the usual place?" The usual place was a small park near where they'd grown up, far from anywhere Alyssa or her family might frequent. There, Malcolm would begin to construct his response measured, controlled, and ultimately devastating to those who had dismissed him as beneath them. The board was set. The first move had been made against him. Now Malcolm would show the Thorne family exactly who they were dealing with. The park hadn't changed much since Malcolm and Trevor used to ride their bikes through as kids. The same weathered picnic tables, the same creaking swing set. Malcolm sat waiting, a coffee in each hand, watching a group of children chase each other around the playground. Trevor Miles pulled up at his food truck, the colorful logo for Street Fleet Eats visible even from distance. He parked haphazardly and bounded out, all energy in motion, a stark contrast to Malcolm's stillness. "This must be serious," Trevor said as he approached, accepting the offered coffee. "You only come to the old neighborhood when something's really wrong." Malcolm nodded toward the picnic table. Once they were seated, he unlocked his phone and slid it across to Trevor. "Read that," he said simply to Trevor's normally jovial expression darkened as he read Delaney's message. "That entitled little—" He stopped himself, looking up at Malcolm. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to divorce Alyssa." Trevor let out a low whistle. "Just like that? One text?" "It's not just one text," Malcolm replied, taking his phone back. "It's years of this. The subtle digs, the backhanded compliments, the constant reminder that I don't belong in their world. Alyssa's always defended them, said I was being too sensitive." He tapped the screen. "This is just the first time they've been stupid enough to put it in writing." "Man, I never liked them," Trevor said, shaking his head. "Remember when her mother came to my truck downtown, ordered the special, and then told me it was surprisingly adequate for street food?" Malcolm nodded. Joelle Thorne has elevated condescension to an art form. "So what's the plan?" "Lawyer up and walk away." Malcolm took a sip of his coffee, his eyes focused on the distance. "I could. The prenup is solid. But that's not enough." Trevor raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "They've spent years humiliating me in private. I want them to experience it in public." Malcolm turned to look directly at his friend. "I need your help." Trevor leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "I'm in. What do you need?" "First, information. You cater to half the event planners in Charlotte. Do you know who's handling Delaney's wedding?" Trevor thought for a moment. "Yeah, has to be Hollis Wren. She does all the high-end Asheville weddings. Great person, actually, despite the clientele. Makes a point of stopping by my truck whenever she's in town. Can you set up a meeting? Somewhere private. Consider it done." Trevor pulled out his phone. "Anything else?" Malcolm nodded slowly. "The wedding cake. Who's making it?" "That will be Marco Bellini. Italian guy. Moved here about 5 years ago. Opened that bakery in South End that always has a line around the block. Has he worked with the Thornes before?" Trevor snorted. "Oh yeah, and I bet there's a story there. Marco's got a temper when people don't pay what they owe, and the Thornes are notorious for renegotiating after services are rendered." A small smile played at the corner of Malcolm's mouth. "Perfect. I need to talk to him too." Trevor studied his friend's face. "You've got something big planned, don't you? Let's just say I'm going to make a wedding gift they'll never forget." 2 days later, Malcolm sat in a quiet corner of a small cafe, waiting. The lunch crowd had thinned, leaving only a few patrons scattered among the tables. The door opened, letting in a gust of spring air along with a harried-looking woman in her 40s, her curly hair escaping for what had probably started the day as a neat bun. Hollis Wren spotted him immediately and made her way over, extending her hand. "Mr. Reed?" Trevor said it was important. Malcolm stood and shook her hand. "Thank you for meeting me. Please call me Malcolm." They sat, and Hollis fixed him with an appraising look. "Trevor mentioned you're connected to the Thorne Kavanaugh wedding. You're Alyssa's husband, right?" "I don't believe we've met." "We haven't. I tend to avoid Thorne family events when possible." Malcolm's tone was neutral, but something in it made Hollis's expression shift slightly. "Smart man," she said quietly, then quickly added, "I shouldn't say that. They're clients. Difficult clients, I imagine." Hollis gave a careful shrug. "All clients have their particularities." Malcolm slid a folder across the table. "I'd like to show you something, with the understanding that this conversation remains between us." Curiosity flickered across Hollis's face as she opened the folder and read Delaney's message. She looked up, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry, Malcolm. That's cruel. It's honest at least," he replied, which is refreshing, coming from the Thorns. Hollis closed the folder and pushed it back toward him. "What exactly do you want from me, Malcolm? Because if it's to sabotage the wedding, I can't help you. My reputation. I don't want to sabotage the wedding," Malcolm interrupted. "I want to add something to it. Something unexpected, but not disruptive. The ceremony will proceed perfectly. The reception will be exactly as planned. With one small addition." Hollis leaned back, studying him. "I'm listening. I understand Marco Bellini is creating the cake." "Yes, a 5-tier masterpiece. It's costing a fortune." Malcolm nodded. "I'd like to commission a special top layer. Something that looks identical to his design, but contains a surprise inside." "What kind of surprise?" "Nothing dangerous. Nothing that would harm anyone. Just some documents, printed on edible paper. They'll only be revealed when the cake is cut." Hollis frowned. "That's still disruption, Malcolm." "It's truth," he countered, "and I'm willing to make it worth your while. Your help with this, plus a sizable donation to that children's art program you volunteer with. Trevor mentioned you've been trying to expand it." Surprise registered on Hollis's face. "You've done your homework." "I'm thorough." Hollis tapped her fingers on the table, considering. "The Thorns have been challenging. Delaney reduced my assistant to tears last week. Her mother questions every decision despite having no experience in event planning." She looked up at Malcolm. "What exactly would be on these edible documents?" "The text message you just read. Proof of payment for the wedding. And a prenuptial clause that Alyssa should have read more carefully before signing." Hollis was quiet for a long moment. "No one would get hurt. Only pride." She nodded slowly. "I'll introduce you to Marco. That's all I can promise right now." Malcolm extended his hand. "That's all I ask." Marco Bellini's kitchen was immaculate, a temple to the art of pastry. The man himself was less polished flour dusting his black t-shirt, a 2-day stubble on his jaw, dark eyes intense as he evaluated Malcolm. "So you want to ruin the cake," Marco said bluntly, his accent still strong despite years in the States. "No," Malcolm replied calmly. "I want to enhance it. The cake will be beautiful, exactly as you designed it. I just want the top layer to contain something extra." Marco crossed his arms. "Why should I risk my reputation? The Thorns move in powerful circles. The same powerful circles where they told everyone your work was overpriced after trying to pay you half your invoice for their Christmas party last year." Marco's eyebrows shot up. How do you know about that?" "Charlotte's a small city when you know where to listen. They did eventually pay, but only after you threatened to tell everyone they couldn't afford the full bill." A slow smile spread across Marco's face. "You've done your research, Mr. Reed. I value preparation." Marco walked to a workstation and picked up a sketch of an elaborate wedding cake. "This is the design. 5 tiers, hand-piped details, sugar flowers. The top tier," he pointed to the drawing, "is mainly for show, often saved for the first anniversary, though most people forget. That's the one I want modified." Marco studied Malcolm's face. "What exactly do you want inside it?" "Documents printed on edible paper. I'll provide the designs. The cake should collapse when cut, revealing what's inside. And if I refuse..." Malcolm met his gaze steadily. "Then I find another baker. But it seems to me we could help each other. You get paid twice for the same cake, once by them, once by me. Plus the satisfaction of knowing the Thorns finally get what they deserve." Marco was quiet for a moment, then extended his flour-covered hand. "I'll need the designs by next week. And payment up front." Malcolm shook his hand. "You'll have both." As he left the bakery, Malcolm felt a grim satisfaction settling over him. The pieces were falling into place, a carefully constructed response to years of subtle degradation. The Thorns had mistaken his quietness for weakness, his restraint for lack of backbone. They were about to learn how wrong they had been a week before the wedding. Malcolm sat in his home office, the house quiet in Alyssa's absence. She'd been spending more time with her family lately, helping with wedding preparations, or at least, that's what she'd told him. He suspected she was simply avoiding the growing tension between them. Malcolm hadn't confronted her about Delaney's message. Instead, he'd withdrawn, creating a careful distance that Alyssa had noticed but seemed unwilling to breach. She tried at first casual touches when passing him in the hallway, questions about his day, but his monosyllabic responses had eventually discouraged her. Now he sat before his computer, finalizing the designs that would go into Delaney's wedding cake. The first document was simple, a screenshot of Delaney's message, enhanced for clarity, bordered with delicate edible glitter that matched the wedding colors. The second showed the bank transfer, $22,000 from his account to Delaney's, date and time clearly visible. The third was the most damaging, an excerpt from their prenuptial agreement, with one clause highlighted. In the event that either party publicly humiliates, betrays, or brings deliberately negative attention to the other in a way that causes demonstrable harm to reputation or standing, the offending party forfeits all claims to marital assets beyond those they brought into the marriage. Malcolm had insisted on this clause, knowing the Thorns' penchant for social performances. Alyssa had signed without argument, likely assuming it would never come into play. He attached the finalized designs to an encrypted email and sent them to Marco, along with the second payment installment. Then he opened another email, this one to his lawyer, with instructions to be ready the day after the wedding. His phone buzzed with a text from Trevor, food truck booked for Saturday. Operation Frosting in motion. Malcolm allowed himself a small smile. While Delaney's wedding proceeded in Asheville, he and Trevor would be hosting a barbecue at Trevor's place, live streaming the event in carefully staged defiance. The doorbell rang, pulling Malcolm from his thoughts. He wasn't expecting anyone. Making his way to the front door, he looked through the peephole to see a young woman with dark hair and familiar features, Thorn features, but sharper, more thoughtful. He opened the door. Nicolette, Nikki Thorn, Delaney's cousin and the black sheep of the family, stood on his porch looking uncomfortable. Malcolm, I should have called first. It's fine. Alyssa's not here. I know. I wanted to talk to you. She shifted her weight. Can I come in? Malcolm stepped aside, gesturing her into the living room. Nikki had always been different from the rest of the Thorns, more genuine, less concerned with appearance. She was the only one who'd ever made a real effort with him. Nikki perched on the edge of the sofa, declining his offer of a drink. I saw the message, she said without preamble. Delaney's text to you. She was showing it off at the bridal shower. Malcolm kept his expression neutral. Was Alyssa there? Yes. Nikki met his eyes directly. She laughed, Malcolm. Then she tried to get Delaney to delete it in case you overreacted. The confirmation stung, but Malcolm had expected nothing less. Thank you for telling me. Nikki frowned. That's it. Thank you for telling me. Malcolm, my cousin is treating you like garbage, and her family is encouraging it. What would you have me do, Nikki? Confront them? Create a scene? That's exactly what they want, proof that I don't belong in their world. Maybe their world isn't worth belonging to, Nikki said quietly. Malcolm studied her for a moment. You never quite fit either, did you? Nikki gave a humorless laugh. The Thorn family doesn't tolerate deviation. I chose a career in education instead of marrying into money. Unforgivable sin. And yet you're still invited to the wedding. Blood is blood. They'd never exclude me, it would raise questions. But they'll seat me with the distant relatives no one remembers. She leaned forward. Malcolm, are you really going to let them get away with this? Something in her tone made Malcolm look at her more carefully. What have you heard? Uncle Harold was drunk at the rehearsal dinner last night. Kept muttering about frosting secrets and how the computer guy finally grew a spine. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Malcolm's face revealed nothing. Your uncle has always had an active imagination. Nikki held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, just whatever you're planning, be careful. The Thorns fight dirty when cornered. I'm aware. As he showed her out, Nikki paused at the door. For what it's worth, I always thought you were too good for Alyssa. Too real. After she left, Malcolm returned to his office and opened his laptop. A new email had arrived from Marco, confirming receipt of the designs. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Malcolm picked up a small box from his desk and opened it, revealing a t-shirt folded neatly inside. He shook it out, examining the custom printing on the front. $22,000 for cake and chaos. It would make the perfect attire for Saturday's barbecue. The morning of Delaney's wedding dawned clear and bright in Charlotte. Malcolm rose early, packed a small overnight bag, and left before Alyssa returned from Asheville, where she'd spent the night with the bridal party. He left no note, no explanation for his absence. Let her wondered, he drove to Trevor's house in the university area, a modest bungalow with a sprawling backyard perfect for the day's events. Trevor was already outside, setting up his mobile kitchen, the smoker already puffing away with the promise of brisket to come. Morning, Revenge Maestro, Trevor called, raising a coffee mug in salute. Ready for the performance? Malcolm nodded, unloading a cooler from his trunk. Everything set up, live stream ready to go, hashtag created, strategic invitations sent. Trevor grinned. Half the tech community in Charlotte will be here, including those developers the Thorns stiffed on their website last year. Perfect. As they worked setting up tables and chairs, Trevor studied his friend. You doing okay with all this? It's not too late to back out, you know. Malcolm paused, considering the question seriously. I've spent 5 years being tolerated by my wife's family. 5 years of subtle jabs and not-so-subtle dismissals. 5 years watching Alyssa choose them over me, time and again. He shook his head. No, I'm not backing out. They chose this moment, not me. Trevor clapped him on the shoulder. Then let's make it memorable. By noon, the backyard was filling with colleagues from Malcolm's firm, friends from their tech circles, even a few of Alyssa's acquaintances who'd never quite made it into the Thorns' inner circle. Music played, drinks flowed, and the aroma of smoked meat filled the air. Malcolm changed into the custom t-shirt, its message clear against the black fabric. He timed it perfectly. The wedding ceremony would be starting in Asheville, while here in Charlotte, a very different celebration was underway. Ready to go live? Trevor asked, holding up his phone. Malcolm nodded, positioning himself near the smoker, drink in hand. Trevor started the stream, connecting it to several social media platforms simultaneously. Hey everyone, Trevor said to the camera. Welcome to the real party. While some people are putting on a show in Asheville, we're keeping it real in Charlotte. Say hi to your host, Malcolm. Malcolm raised his glass to the camera. Cheers to honesty over pretense, and to investments that pay unexpected dividends. The comment section on the stream immediately lit up with questions, many from people who knew both Malcolm and the Thorns. Trevor read a few aloud, letting Malcolm respond with carefully measured answers that revealed nothing specific while implying much. Meanwhile, in Asheville, the wedding was progressing just as planned. Malcolm could picture it clearly: the exclusive mountain venue, the string quartet, the parade of Charlotte's elite in their finest attire. Delaney would be radiant, no doubt, and Alyssa would be the perfect supportive sister, her smile never slipping. But underneath, there would be tension. Harold's drunken mutterings would have spread, creating ripples of unease. Nikki would be watching everything with knowing eyes. And when the reception began, when the cake was wheeled out in all its splendor, the real show would start. Malcolm checked his watch. Almost time. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from an unknown number. He opened it to find a message from Nikki. Cake just arrived. It's spectacular. Whatever happens next, I want front row seats. Malcolm smiled and slipped the phone back into his pocket. To the live stream audience, he raised his glass again. To revelations, he said. May they be as sweet as they are surprising. On the other side of the screen, hundreds watched and wondered, the hashtag frosting secrets beginning to trend locally. The trap was set. Now all Malcolm had to do was wait for it to spring. The Asheville Mountain Resort glittered with fairy lights as evening descended, the reception in full swing. In the grand ballroom, 200 guests in formal attire mingled and danced, champagne flowing freely. The Thorne-Kavanaugh wedding was, by all appearances, the social event of the season. Malcolm wasn't there to witness it, but Marco's assistant was, having been sent to deliver and assemble the cake. Through a series of discreet texts, she kept Malcolm and his allies informed of the proceedings. Cake in position, bride approaching. Malcolm, still at Trevor's barbecue, read the message and nodded to his friend. Trevor immediately directed everyone's attention to a large screen he'd set up in the backyard. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's the moment we've been waiting for," Trevor announced. "Thanks to our inside source, we're about to witness the unveiling of the world's most expensive dessert." The screen came to life, showing a social media feed from one of Delaney's bridesmaids, who was live streaming the reception. In the frame, Delaney and her new husband approached a magnificent 5-tiered cake, its white fondant decorated with intricate piping and sugar flowers that matched the bridal bouquet perfectly. "That's a Marco Bellini original," Trevor narrated for the crowd. "Excluding our special modification, it cost $12,000. Low whistles and murmurs rippled through the barbecue guests. On screen, the bride and groom posed for photos beside the cake, their smiles wide and practiced. The camera panned briefly, catching Alyssa in the background, resplendent in her maid of honor dress. Her expression a mixture of joy and something else, anxiety, perhaps. "Here we go," Malcolm said quietly as the couple was handed a silver cake knife that on screen, Delaney and her husband positioned the knife over the top tier of the cake, their hands clasped together in the traditional pose. They pressed down, the knife slicing easily through the fondant. And then, as if in slow motion, the top tier seemed to shudder and collapse inward, releasing a shower of edible glitter and 3 folded documents that tumbled out onto the pristine tablecloth. The camera wobbled as the bridesmaid gasped. Other phones rose around the cake table, capturing the moment from different angles. Delaney's expression transformed from confusion to horror as she picked up one of the documents and unfolded it. Even through the shaky footage, the message was clear: "Please don't come. We don't need poor people like you at our wedding." Delaney's face drained of color. The camera caught Joelle Thorne pushing through the crowd, trying to gather the fallen papers before more guests could see them. Too late, the other documents had already been unfolded by curious attendees. "Oh my God," someone off camera said. "Is that her sister's prenup?" The footage cut out abruptly. The bridesmaid, likely realizing this wasn't a moment to be shared publicly, but by then, dozens of other videos were appearing online, captured by guests who had no such reservations. T. Trevor's barbecue. The crowd erupted in a mixture of gasps, laughter, and applause. Malcolm stood silently, watching as the carefully constructed facade of Thorne family perfection crumbled in real time. Trevor approached, offering a fresh drink. "You okay?" Malcolm nodded slowly. "It's done." His phone began buzzing, incessantly calls from Alyssa, from Joelle, even one from Delaney. He silenced it without answering, then turned it off completely. They had demanded his absence. Now they would experience it absolutely. "What happens now?" Trevor asked quietly. "Now we wait," Malcolm replied. "The truth is out there. It can't be undone or explained away." As the barbecue continued around him, Malcolm felt no joy in the Thorns' humiliation, only a grim satisfaction that justice had finally been served. For years, they had treated him as less than, had mocked and belittled him behind closed doors while accepting his money and connections. Now everyone would see them for what they truly were on his shirt. The words, $22,000 for cake and chaos, caught the light of the setting sun. An expensive lesson, perhaps, but one the Thorns wouldn't soon forget. 2 days after the wedding, Malcolm sat in his living room, reviewing the emails, news articles, and social media posts that had exploded in the wake of what people were now calling Cakegate. The story had spread far beyond their social circle, picked up by local news, and then amplified by viral content sites. The Thorns, once Charlotte's social arbiters, had become a cautionary tale of pride and comeuppance. Malcolm had stayed at Trevor's that weekend, ignoring the barrage of calls and messages. He'd returned home only when he knew Alyssa would be back, wanting to face whatever came next on his own territory. The sound of a key in the lock announced her arrival. Malcolm closed his laptop and waited, calm and prepared. Alyssa entered like a storm, her normally perfect appearance disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed and wild. She dropped her bags in the entryway and stood before him, trembling with some mix of fury and desperation. "How could you?" she demanded, her voice hoarse. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Malcolm regarded her steadily. "I think that question belongs to you, Alyssa. You humiliated my sister at her wedding. My entire family is a laughingstock. People are canceling business deals with my father. My mother can't show her face at the club. She paced frantically, all because you couldn't take a joke." "A joke?" Malcolm repeated, his tone flat. "Is that what it was when Delaney told me not to come because I'm too poor? When your mother called me embarrassing? When you sat there and laughed along with them?" Alyssa faltered, the first hints of uncertainty crossing her face. "I didn't." "You did." Malcolm stood and walked to his desk, retrieving a folder. "Nikki told me everything, Alyssa. How you were there when Delaney showed off that text. How you laughed before suggesting she delete it, so I wouldn't overreact." "Nikki," Alyssa hissed. "That traitor." "No, the only honest thorn." Malcolm opened the folder and laid its contents on the coffee table. "These are copies of what was in the cake. I thought you might want to see them properly." Alyssa stared at the documents, but didn't touch them. "It was just a stupid text, Malcolm. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything." Malcolm's voice remained steady. "It was the truth you've all been hiding from me. The truth I always knew but could never prove. So you destroyed my sister's wedding? Made my family into a joke? All for revenge." "For clarity," Malcolm corrected, "I'm done being the outsider you all tolerate because of my money. I'm done watching you choose them over me, time after time." Alyssa's expression shifted, calculation replacing outrage. She moved toward him, reaching for his hand. "Malcolm, we can fix this. We can work through this together. I love you." Malcolm stepped back. "No, Alyssa. You love what I provide: stability, money, a respectable front for your family's financial problems. But you've never loved me." "That's not true," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Please, Malcolm, don't throw away 5 years over one stupid incident." "It wasn't one incident. It was hundreds of small cuts day after day." Malcolm picked up another folder from his desk and held it out to her. "This is why I'm really done." Alyssa took the folder with shaking hands and opened it. Inside were the printed text message, the bank transaction record, the highlighted prenup clause, and beneath them all, divorce papers already signed by Malcolm. "No," she breathed, dropping the folder as if it had burned her. "You can't do this." "I already have." Malcolm's voice remained calm. "You betrayed me publicly, Alyssa. The prenup is clear. You forfeit all claims to marital assets beyond what you brought into the marriage." "Which was nothing," she said, her voice hollow. "Not my problem." Alyssa's shock gave way to desperate anger. "My family will fight this. We have connections. Judges who owe us favors. Your family is in no position to call in favors right now. And even if they were, everything is documented. The prenup is ironclad." Malcolm crossed his arms. "You betrayed me for people who'd sell you out for a champagne flute. We're done." Alyssa crumpled onto the sofa, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Malcolm. Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do?" For a brief moment, Malcolm felt a twinge of pity, remembering the woman he'd once loved. But then he recalled her laughter at Delaney's cruel text, the years of subtle humiliation, and his resolve hardened. "You have 3 days to collect your personal belongings. My lawyer will be present to ensure you take only what's rightfully yours." He moved toward the door. "I'll be staying elsewhere until then." "Malcolm, wait," Alyssa called, her voice breaking. "We can work this out. I'll cut ties with them. I'll do whatever you want." Malcolm paused at the doorway. "You know what's truly ironic, Alyssa? I would have given you half of everything if you'd just been honest, if you'd admitted your family's treatment of me was wrong and stood with me instead of them. But you couldn't do that, not even now." He picked up his overnight bag. "Goodbye, Alyssa. The security codes will be changed on Thursday. Don't be here." As he walked out, leaving his wife sobbing on the sofa, Malcolm felt no triumph, only the quiet relief of finally breaking free from a toxicity that had poisoned his life for far too long. 6 weeks later, Malcolm stood beside his attorney in the Mecklenburg County Courthouse, watching as Alyssa and her lawyer huddled in whispered conference across the room. She looked diminished somehow, her designer outfit still impeccable, but her presence less commanding. The Thorne aura of invincibility had been shattered, leaving her vulnerable in ways she'd never anticipated. Their divorce proceedings had moved quickly, the prenuptial agreement creating a clear path forward. But Alyssa, desperate and cornered, had filed a countersuit claiming emotional distress and public humiliation. It was a last-ditch effort to salvage something from the wreckage of their marriage. Judge Eleanor Barton, a no-nonsense veteran of family court, called the session to order. Malcolm had researched her thoroughly. She was known for her strict adherence to documentation and little patience for emotional manipulation. "I've reviewed the filings in this case," Judge Barton began, peering over her reading glasses. "Ms. Thornreed alleges that Mr. Reed deliberately orchestrated a public humiliation that has caused significant emotional distress and financial damages. Mr. Reed contends that he is merely enforcing the terms of a prenuptial agreement that Ms. Thornreed willingly signed." Is that an accurate summary? Both attorneys confirmed it was. "Very well. Ms. Crawford, please present your client's case." Alyssa's attorney, a sharp-featured woman in an expensive suit, approached the bench. "Your Honor, my client has suffered tremendous damage to her reputation and mental health as a result of Mr. Reed's vindictive actions. The so-called cake incident was clearly planned to cause maximum embarrassment to the Thorne family, resulting in canceled business deals, social ostracism, and significant emotional trauma for my client." Judge Barton nodded. "And the prenuptial agreement? We contend that Mr. Reed's actions constitute a disproportionate response to what was essentially a private family joke. The prenup should be set aside on grounds of unconscionability." "I see. Mr. Hargrove, your response?" Malcolm's attorney stood. "Your Honor, the facts are simple. Ms. Thornreed's sister sent my client a text message explicitly telling him not to attend her wedding because he was too poor. This message was shown around at a bridal shower, where Ms. Thornreed herself laughed and participated in the mockery. The prenuptial agreement, which Ms. Thornreed signed willingly and with independent legal counsel, clearly states that public humiliation of either party results in forfeiture of marital assets." He held up a tablet. "We have sworn testimony from multiple witnesses regarding Ms. Thornreed's participation in the mockery. We also have video evidence from the wedding showing the documents that revealed this behavior. My client simply ensured that the truth came to light." Judge Barton turned to Alyssa's attorney. "Did your client participate in mocking Mr. Reed?" The attorney hesitated. "Your Honor, context is important here. It was a light-hearted moment during wedding preparations." "That's not what I asked," the judge interrupted. "Did she participate? Yes or no? There may have been some laughter, but I'll take that as a yes." The judge turned back to Malcolm's attorney. "The prenup is clear about the consequences?" "Crystal clear, Your Honor. Section 7, paragraph 3 states, in the event that either party publicly humiliates, betrays, or brings deliberately negative attention to the other in a way that causes demonstrable harm to reputation or standing, the offending party forfeits all claims to marital assets beyond those they brought into the marriage." Judge Barton nodded. "Ms. Crawford, did your client bring any significant assets into the marriage?" The attorney shifted uncomfortably. "My client brought her considerable social connections and family name, which significantly benefited Mr. Reed's business." "That's not a financial asset, counselor." The judge reviewed some papers before looking up. "I'm ready to rule on this matter." The courtroom fell silent. The prenuptial agreement between Malcolm Reed and Alyssa Thornreed is valid and enforceable. The evidence clearly shows that Ms. Thornreed participated in public mockery of her husband, triggering the clause regarding humiliation and betrayal. Therefore, as per the terms of the agreement, she forfeits all claims to marital assets beyond those she brought into the marriage. Judge Barton looked directly at Alyssa. "As for the countersuit alleging emotional distress, I find no merit in these claims. Mr. Reed revealed only the truth that Ms. Thornreed and her family created through their own actions. While the method of revelation was certainly dramatic, it does not constitute actionable harm." The judge tapped her gavel once. "The divorce is granted on grounds of irreconcilable differences. Assets will be distributed according to the prenuptial agreement. Case closed." Malcolm released a slow breath as Alyssa collapsed into sobs across the room. Her mother, seated in the gallery, rushed forward to console her, shooting Malcolm a venomous glare that he met with calm indifference. Outside the courthouse, Malcolm's attorney shook his hand. "Congratulations. That went exactly as we expected." Malcolm nodded, watching as Alyssa was ushered out a side door to avoid the small crowd of reporters that had gathered. "Not about winning," he said quietly. "About consequences." As he walked down the courthouse steps, he spotted Nikki waiting by his car. She straightened as he approached. "I heard the ruling," she said. "Aunt Joelle must be having a conniption." "I imagine so. Alyssa's moving back home. Temporary, they're saying, but—" Nikki shrugged. "The Thorne family fortune isn't what it once was, especially after this scandal." Malcolm unlocked his car. "Not my concern anymore." "What will you do now?" Nikki asked. Malcolm considered the question. For so long, his life had been defined by his relationship with Alyssa and, by extension, the Thorne family. Now that chapter was closed. "Move forward," he said simply. "You?" Nikki smiled slightly. "Similarly unencumbered by Thorne expectations these days. I've been thinking about expanding that literacy program I run at the community center. We need funding, though." "Interesting coincidence," Malcolm replied. "I've been thinking about where to direct some of my resources now that I'm single again." They looked at each other with understanding. Two people who had escaped the Thorne family's toxic orbit and found something more authentic on the other side. "Coffee next week," Malcolm suggested. "Bring your program proposal." Nikki nodded. "I'd like that." 4 months after the divorce was finalized, Malcolm stood at the podium in a renovated warehouse space in Charlotte's Arts District, addressing a crowd of young adults, community leaders, and media representatives. "Welcome to the official launch of Clarity Foundation," he said, his voice strong and clear in the open space. "Our mission is simple: to provide financial literacy and emotional resilience training to young adults as they navigate their entry into independence." In the front row, Nikki sat beside Hollis Wren, both women beaming with pride. Behind them, Trevor stood at the back of his food truck, serving hors d'oeuvres to the attendees while Marco Bellini arranged an elegant display of pastries on a nearby table. "Many of you know the story that led to this foundation's creation," Malcolm continued. "A personal betrayal that became very public. What you may not know is how that experience clarified something for me. Financial independence is about more than money. It's about understanding your worth, recognizing manipulation, and having the tools to stand firm in your own truth." The crowd nodded appreciatively. What had begun as Charlotte gossip had evolved into something more meaningful, a genuine effort to help others avoid the pitfalls of toxic relationships and financial dependence. "Today, we're announcing 3 initiatives," Malcolm said. "First, a scholarship program for first-generation college students. Second, a mentorship network connecting young professionals with established leaders in their fields. And third, a series of workshops on financial planning, conflict resolution, and boundary setting." As he outlined the details of each program, Malcolm couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him here. The pain of Alyssa's betrayal had faded, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. What the Thornes had intended as humiliation had instead become liberation. After the presentation, as guests mingled and networked, Malcolm made his way to where Trevor was serving his signature sliders from the food truck window. "Quite a turnout," Trevor said, nodding toward the crowd. "Who would have thought revenge would lead to philanthropy?" Malcolm accepted a slider. "Not revenge. Justice. Call what you want, but you have to admit there's some satisfaction in how things turned out. Your foundation is launching to rave reviews while the Thornes are practically in hiding." Trevor grinned. "Speaking of which, did you hear about Delaney's husband? Filing for annulment, last I heard. Finalized yesterday. Turns out he doesn't appreciate being tied to Charleston's most notorious social climbers. His family threatened to cut him off if he stayed married to her." Malcolm shook his head. The Thornes are learning the hard way that appearance isn't everything. And Alyssa, living with Joelle, last I heard, trying to rebuild her social connections, but it's slow going. The cake video made the rounds in every circle that matters to them. Trevor studied his friend's face. "And how do you feel about that?" Malcolm considered the question seriously. I don't wish her ill, but I don't wish her well, either. She made her choices consistently for years. Now she's living with the consequences. Fair enough. Trevor nodded toward where Nikki and Hollis were deep in conversation with a group of potential donors. Those two, though they're the real winners in all this. Malcolm smiled. Nikki had found her purpose as the foundation's educational director, while Hollis had expanded her business to include corporate event planning, with the Clarity Foundation as her first major client. Even Marco had benefited, his bakery becoming a sensation after the story broke, with people lining up to order from the cake guy. As the evening wound down, Malcolm found himself alone for a moment, looking out over the city through the warehouse's large windows. Charlotte's skyline glittered in the distance, the same view he'd seen reflected in his office window the day he received Delaney's message the day everything changed. In his pocket, he carried a small reminder, a printed version of that text message, laminated and kept not out of bitterness, but as a reminder of his worth and the importance of boundaries. He'd meant what he said to Trevor. He didn't wish Alyssa and her family ill, but he also didn't regret the path that had led him here, to clarity, to purpose, to a life uncomplicated by the need to please people who would never truly accept him. The sound of approaching footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. Nikki joined him at the window, offering a glass of champagne. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. Malcolm clinked his glass against hers. "And to knowing your worth." They stood in comfortable silence, looking out at the city spread before them. Behind them, the foundation's logo, a stylized cake with a document rising from it, was projected on the wall, a symbol of truth revealed and lessons learned. Malcolm took a sip of champagne, savoring the moment of quiet triumph. He had lost a wife, but gained something far more valuable: the knowledge that he would never again compromise his dignity for acceptance, never again question his worth because of someone else's judgment. That IT had been an expensive lesson, $22,000.